Hello, trying to be positive. I still feel weird about calling you guys that, but positivities, P-dots, that's cute. Maybe we'll go with that. We are here today with another amazing fertility story on the trailing end. Is it trailing end or tail end? I think it's tail end of the egg freezing episode. We have one of my most favorite people. She is a long-term patient of mine, and she originally was coming to see me for not fertility, which back in the day, believe it or not, I had an interest outside of fertility. And she is now here to tell us her fertility story from when it didn't matter to when it mattered a tremendous deal. So stay tuned. Watch the whole episode. Like, subscribe, review. And I think that's it. Right, Ryan? Great. Okay. Should we just dive right in? Here we go. Wendy.
Anne.
You got to see me at my finest, doing potentially one of my best intros yet.
It was amazing.
I promised these people that one of these days I was going to do a backflip, and so that it would be worthwhile to actually go to the YouTube channel as opposed to just listening to it as a podcast. But I'm not particularly flexible, so I've been working at that.
I'd subscribe.
Oh, you subscribe. Honestly, by the time we get to maybe 100 episodes, I will be able to at least touch my toes. But there's no promising. Do you remember when I started that yoga class back in Liberty Village?
Yes.
With a qualified yoga teacher, not me. I did the acupuncture portion, but she did the yoga. I think you came to that.
I think I did.
God, you're such a super fan. I'm obsessed with you. Wendy, how long have you been seeing me?
About 12 years now.
Oh my God.
I think 12, 13 years. Yeah.
We jump in?
We should jump in.
To why? Let's just jump into your medical history. We'll jump right in. Tell all these people about why you originally came to see me before it was even cool to do so.
Yeah. And that was a long time back.
It was a risk.
I would say it was, I sought you out because it was a point in my life where I was not feeling well. I had been on Diane 35 birth control since I was 17.
Yes.
And I remember I was like looking for a bunch of different holistic things to help me. I was like sluggish, feeling ill all the time. I had developed an intolerance to gluten, lactose. I was just overall from like 28 to 30, just like in the poorest health. I was depressed, and I didn't relate anything to hormones. So I was like, okay, I don't know. Like, and I was Googling. I lived in like close by to Liberty Village at the time. And I was like, okay, Anne, she looks like she could fix me.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone has ever looked at my photo and thought to themselves that I could do pretty much anything. It's mostly they arrive here, they don't.
I think it was like the energy tree that sold me.
Yes.
I was like, I needed to move this energy in another way.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic.
And that's really, why I sought you out. But like connecting it in terms of, okay, this may be hormone related. It may be a bunch of things related, but
you were the most well-versed patient I'd ever had pop into that little studio. You taught me more, I think, than I taught you.
Well, I was on a mission at that point.
You were on a quest. So initially, you started to feel terrible.
Yes.
And then you thought to yourself, like, there must be something terribly wrong with me. And so did you go to the doctor at that point? Or did you just opt to find your own path?
I kind of found my own path.
Right.
Because I felt like there was nothing medically wrong with me.
So then you went to that body scan place in Yorkville where the man who started, I think, his wife died?
Yes.
Tragically?
Of cancer.
Of cancer.
Yes.
So he sought to start implementing this scan,
Yes.
like thermo
Yes. It was like
scanning.
thermal scanning, but yeah.
Right.
To kind of just show where there's
Inflammation.
inflammation in your body, areas of your body that, are non-functioning,
Right.
which very much he was shocked at, like, my liver, and asked a lot of questions, like, do you drink a lot of alcohol? Like, all signs of where I lived a very healthy lifestyle, that
Yes.
my body was not functioning very well. But rewind back to when I was a teen, like, no one had, like, 10 years later, no one had had ever said to me, I guess now, being an adult, I think doing my research, and now that the birth control that I was on is no longer prescribed as a birth control, no one told me that there could be long-term effects of being on a birth control.
And you were just doing it initially for your skin.
I
Right?
was doing it when I was 17 because I was having a period twice a month.
Right.
I sought it out to overall regulate my cycle.
Yes.
But the benefit was also that when it was given to me as an option, the option was, oh, this will also make your skin amazing.
Right.
And as a normal teenager, I was like, this is
sold.
Perfect. I'm sold on this.
A regular period that's easy, no cramps, minimal bleeding, and then clear skin.
Yes.
Versus just trudging along 2 periods a month and trying to figure out what's actually wrong.
Yes. And at the time, I was kind of like, did all these ultrasounds, and the doctor had said, yeah, you're having your cycle twice a month. It looks like you maybe have a high probability of having twins. Like, you should be also very cautious as a teenager because you could very easily get pregnant and have twins. And when I was 17 and someone told me that, I was like,
which is also insane. Because
scared.
if you're having 2 separate cycles, it would mean that you would ovulate twice a month.
Yes.
Which would make having twins almost impossible unless you were like Elspeth, who has 2 separate uteruses.
I agree. And I didn't really understand fertility at the time. So I was kind of like, I just thought I released 2 eggs at once.
Right. Right. I see. And then you were deeply concerned. Yes. Fair enough.
But now that you explained it like that, which is why I had a period twice a month.
Yeah. You're like, that
just means it doubles the chances of me getting pregnant, not actually having twins.
Yes. More frequently. But even then, like, how likely would it be that your lining would build up sufficiently and that your corpus luteum would have done its job of holding that lining long enough for implantation? I'm sure you could have had all sorts of unprotected sex. This is not medical advice. Teenagers, don't do it. Yeah. No teenagers listening to this, not even mine. Okay, so you had your twice a month period.
Yes.
You were given the promise of clear, beautiful skin.
Yes.
With Diane 35.
Yes.
You know what is really funny about that? You know, my uncle was one of their lawyers.
Really?
In all of the class action lawsuits. I probably shouldn't put that on, but I'm going to for scandal.
Well, at the time, I mean, there was so many options, right, of birth control. So I feel like it was kind of like pick whatever one is best for you. And that one just seemed appealing because of the multiple benefits. So,
right. And no downside of having such a high estrogen dose.
Right.
Was there warnings at the time about stroke potentially being an elevated risk?
Not at the time, but then it was, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years later.
Right, blood clots and whatnot.
A bunch of different things. And so I did go back to my doctor and she said, if you want to switch, you can, but just to be aware, there's side effects with any
birth control.
So
your doctor basically gave you all of the options, but told you that there was risk associated with all birth control pills.
Yes.
Did they then say, like, perhaps we should see if you're still getting a period twice a month, or
no,
just carry on?
Just carry on.
Right.
So I did that for 10, 11 years until I started to come to see you.
Right.
And that's only when I started to maybe start to make a correlation of this pill I take every day, because I was taking no other medications. I was like very, very healthy.
Yeah.
Right. And so the only thing I was putting in my body was that.
Right.
And I had never, because I was, not getting married, I was traveling the world, I was working like in my 20s, like fertility was not in my mind at all.
Yeah.
But only when I hit 30 and I was like, okay, now I'm 30, but I am in the worst shape of my life. I actually feel more terrible than I did.
Right.
I mean, what am I going to feel like when I'm 40 if I feel this terrible when I'm 30?
Right.
And that's when I started to put a correlation, and when I really dove into seeing you and going to retreats and just really saying like, I want to take charge of my health and I've got to figure out, how do I feel better again?
Yeah, you were the most devoted patient. You were collecting spring water. We were just discussing that.
Yeah.
Like your own water.
Collecting spring water, doing like a ton of retreats. I would go away on a ton of retreats, just mind, body, doing a bunch of inner work. And then, being I removed all gluten, lactose from my diet, like eating super clean.
Yeah.
And then was like, okay, what am I going to do to fix this? And that's when at 32, I started thinking like, maybe I should start coming off birth control, because back to your point, I had never thought, my cycle has always been 26 days since I started on when I was 17, but I never knew, A, could I get pregnant? Because I never had been pregnant. B, would my cycle be normal? Or would I go back to having the cycle twice a month? I just thought to myself, I can't be on birth control for the rest of my life. So I need to at some point think about getting off of it.
And so one day,
one day I was like, okay, it was around when I was about 34. I had been seeing you for several years. I went to go see a naturopath. She was like, you really like need to detox off this, because even as your liver is indicating, even if you just stop it, it's going to take a really long time to get out of your system because you've been on it for so long. So, and it's been cycling through your liver for 15 years.
Yes.
Yes. Like actually closer to 17 years by that point. So I made the choice at 34. I was not in a relationship, tons of work travel. I was not thinking like, okay, I'm going to come off birth control because I'm going to start trying for a baby, or like think about even having a child. That wasn't in my mind at that time. I was just thinking about like, A, is this going to make me feel better? And B, I need to get to know my body, because I did not know anything about my body.
I remember coming back because I did all my schooling in BC, with most of it done in Vancouver and Victoria for the doctorate of Chinese medicine portion. And when I was taking patients, because as part of schooling, you graduate in parts. So like in 3 years, you take your board exams, you can become an acupuncturist. Then in an additional 2 years, you do the herbal aspect and the doctorate exam, and then you're a doctorate. But for the 3 years before, for 2 years, once I was done that, I could practice. So I was practicing within the public while also going to school. And it wasn't used. Like the birth control pill was just not part of BC culture. And I never was dealing with patients who were using it as, I mean, this is a generalization, but the population that was seeking me out, which is clearly going to be a more health conscious and more alternative population, I'm aware of that. They were not on the birth control pill, and they weren't using it to regulate their cycles. And I just really didn't think about it too much from about, 2007 until 2014. I just didn't really think about it. And then when I started coming back and treating here in Ontario, everybody was on the birth control pill. Everyone was on the birth control pill here, and everybody was afraid of anxiety and depression medication. And it was like a huge shame piece that if you were on anti-anxiety or anti-depression meds, that you had something going on and you should hide that aspect. Like I had a lot of young 20, 30-something-year-olds, and they were nervous about people that they were dating finding out about that. Just such an interesting switch, because in BC, it was very much the opposite. Like people were very
embraced
mental health
yes.
and like really understood the importance of, a mind-body connection and that you
Right.
can't be well physically if you're not well mentally. But here in Ontario, it was like everybody was hiding that aspect and then embracing, the birth control pill where it was hiding in a lot of cases, like hormonal imbalances.
Exactly.
PCOS, like even with endometriosis, well, there's definitely benefits to being on the pill.
Yes.
Most of them are with a progesterone only pill.
Right.
Which is not what most people are on.
Right.
So it's interesting to have this general, like the birth control pill, as opposed to like specifying, for example, like Diane 35 having really high estrogen.
Yes.
Compared to, a Yaz pill, which was like low dose.
Right.
And
right.
progesterone, I
Right.
believe.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, when you came, I remember you were really nervous about going off the pill. And I, coming from this BC background, was like, yeah, we can do this. Let's go.
Well,
let's do this.
I was naive to put all these associations together. Like you said, I was really depressed between 28 and 30, but I never correlated all these things together. And then I did.
Right.
And I was like, very much lack of education about you just make this choice and you do it for 17 years without thinking about it. And I was kind of like, now I feel like I'm an adult because I kind of felt like in my teens and 20s, I was like just doing what other people told me to do because that was like what I was supposed to be doing. But now I'm like, okay, I need to make a decision for myself, even though like most people would say, stay on it until like, why would you come off birth control? You're not trying to conceive. So like if you're out there dating, what are you using for options for birth control? And to your point, there are many other options of birth control, otherwise being on the birth control pill.
Yeah.
I'll have to find other options that work for me when I'm dating, but me not taking the burden of continuing to take this pill and figuring out where I stand in my body. And I think that was the most important thing.
It's very black and white too, in terms of people's stances on the pill. It's similar to like IVF. It's like people feel like you should either be on the pill or not at all. You should either do IVF or you're like full natural. It's not on a per person individual basis.
Right.
Where something might be really appropriate for one person, but not for another.
Or for a period of time, but then not for a consistent 17 years or
without
whatever.
Like medical checkups.
Right.
Seeing what's going on with liver enzymes, for instance. Like, how could you have been on the birth control pill for that long and have no one check to see what it was doing to your blood and to your liver? It's wild.
Yes.
To that point.
And only when I like went to see a naturopath and did all my, hormone panels and like really, started to understand where I was. I didn't go to a GP to do that. I kind of decided to go to a naturopath and say, okay, now we need a detox program. And she had said to me, like, this is probably going to take 4 months or more to really start detoxing off of it. And I was like, okay, like that's very doable.
Yeah.
And then I started doing it. It was a full year and a half. I mean, I remember coming to you and like
sweating.
Well, night sweats, but in tears because I was on Diane 35 since I was 17, I had never had acne. And when I came off of it, the cystic acne that I had developed when I now was like 35 and like dating, I like didn't want to go out because my entire face was covered in cysts from the detoxification. And it was like 9 months after I had stopped. It was really like coming out of my body, and it was literally coming out of my body in my skin.
Too, because the concept of detox, I feel like it's not even properly understood by most healthcare practitioners, in that you weren't necessarily detoxing. What was happening is your ovaries were waking up. So essentially, they hadn't had to form follicles and produce their own estrogen.
Correct. Yeah.
Like 14, 15 years.
Yes.
And so when estrogen was no longer being supplied, your body went into crisis mode and it was freaking out
Yes.
because it wasn't getting a source of estrogen. So then your FSH would have gone up for the first time in years. And you would have had like an awakening of your ovaries. Now they're like figuring out how to ovulate.
Yes.
And they're producing, excess amounts of like testosterone as a precursor to estrogen. And then your estrogen, testosterone are now elevated where they had been very level for years at a time. And as a result, your skin
Yes.
behaved badly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is like for 2 years, almost 2 years. It was a good solid year and a half till I was like 36. And I was like finally feeling like my cycles regulated itself. My skin had died down. Like, and I did notice like a huge change in my mood. I mean, there was multiple factors, and I felt like this was kind of, I was already 6 years into my like wellness journey, but I was kind of finally feeling like.
It's wild too, because all of that synthetic estrogen would have been trapped in like fat cells, and your liver would have had its work cut out for it. So it would have been even significantly longer than that year and a half.
Yes.
And I feel like as your like TCM practitioner, we definitely were treating like kidney yin deficiency.
Yes.
For significantly longer than that amount of time.
Yes.
But it's true. You did like come out of it as a beautiful bird
After the night sweats
flying through as the night sweats cleared. Wendy, like a phoenix, came out of the fire. And then she didn't burst into flame again. Thankfully.
And then I was 37 and I was like, okay, now I'm 37 and now everyone is telling me like, have you thought about like if you want children?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I have just literally spent all this time just trying to feel like myself. And now I'm like, okay, maybe I should be thinking about my fertility. I don't know. And it was really more like, a lot of external pressure from other people being like, okay, you should start thinking about this. And again, I was single, I was dating, I was 37. I was like, okay, I love my life. I have a very busy life. I travel a lot for work. It's going to be very hard for me to like, one, go to all these appointments. So I was like, I don't know, like maybe I just make an appointment with my GP and like start asking questions about what I should do. And that's kind of like what I started to do when I was 37, once I came out of the birth control fog.
And then what did your GP say?
She said, like, if you want me to refer you to a fertility clinic, it's probably a good idea because you are getting up there in age.
It was funny because I remember I was seeing you when we were dealing with just like general wellness.
Yes.
But at the same time, I was studying for my ABORM exam. So
Yes.
my American board exam for reproductive medicine. And I'd been treating at this point almost exclusively fertility patients and you. And you were out of the blue. I had gone off, had Sam, and then I got a text message from you saying, I'm thinking about maybe looking into fertility.
Yes. Freezing my eggs.
What do you think I should do?
Yes.
I was like, what is happening? Go on mat leave for 1 week and Wendy has completely changed her mind.
Yes.
I was happy about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I just felt like I need to explore this avenue and figure out, is this right for me? Is this not right for me? But I thought of it as, I'm not sure. I like to have options. So I'm like, okay, is this going to be an insurance policy or not?
Right. So then you went to the clinic.
I did go to the clinic and I was like, okay, now I've got to do all these tests and things like that, which is fine. And I did do all the tests and came back. And that's where I remember like also texting you when I was in the lobby. I was kind of shocked by my results. Well, not shocked, but they came back with like very low AMH, and I didn't understand them. So that's what I was texting you. I was like, what does this mean? Like, how do I interpret this? You kind of get your results and you don't really understand
what to do with them.
And then I remember you just saying like, that's not an indicator of egg quality.
Or your ability to have a baby.
Yes.
But it is an indicator of you are doing very poorly if you decide to freeze your eggs.
Yes. And that's where, I had the conversation with the doctor and was like, okay, so if this means that if I want to freeze my eggs, what does this look like for me? And he had said for us to be successful, or what we consider success, we probably need to do 3 rounds because of the number of eggs we could get per round. And then obviously like the success rate of, freezing and unfreezing, like minimum 3 rounds. And at that time I was like, okay, I'm traveling a lot for work. So doing all the appointments and the injections and like doing all that, but also not being able to travel anywhere because of Zika, which you could travel if you wanted to, but it's not really considered advisable to do that. I was like, this is going to be a huge disruption to my life. I kind of like my life as it is, but also, is that going to guarantee me anything? So asked you, what does this mean, to kind of help my decision? And then I think I went back upstairs after I had talked to you downstairs. I was like, okay. And then I went back upstairs and asked the doctor, like, essentially, if you were me, would you do it? Would you do the egg freezing? And he was like, no, if I were you, I wouldn't. And that really cemented my decision for me. I in my gut was like, this is not for me. 1, because like, I don't know if this is even going to work. And 2, I just wasn't committed to doing that much in terms of rounds and cost. I was going for an insurance policy. So if it was like 100% on paper, this is your insurance policy, great, sign me up.
But or even like 50.
Yeah.
Even 50%.
Yeah. Or 1 round, okay, I'll fit it into my schedule and like I'll make a commitment. But 3 rounds, like this is going to be going on for a long time and essentially be a really significant chunk of my life that I just don't think I'm prepared to do. And from that, I was like, okay, I kind of have my answer, but now I also have to be comfortable in my decision that I made this decision. And if I can't get pregnant in the future, like I'm okay with it either way. I'm okay if it works in the future. I'm okay if it doesn't, because I made a decision and I'm going to like plow forward. But I think it was like a lot at that time of like, this is the critical, because even what I had heard from my GP is like 36, 30 or 37, 38 is kind of like the egg freezing maximum. And like, we don't like to do it after that, or I'm not sure if that was the clinic that told me that, but I Googled it. I don't know. But it was kind of like, okay, I knew that I didn't have like another window, right? That was like the door was closed. I was now turning 38. So I had made my decision. I was decided to like be okay with it. Yeah.
You know what? You were so uncompromising. It was interesting because at the time I had gone through a divorce, was like raising these 2 little people by myself, also dating at the same time as you when you came.
I remember when you got engaged, yeah.
Yeah, but you were a real beacon for me because you were uncompromising. And I decided, I was like, I will not settle for a partner.
Yeah.
I will in order to make my life feel complete.
Yes.
Like you were thriving.
Yeah, I feel like as women, there's so much pressure to be like, okay, because your clock is ticking, and if you think in the future you want a child, like you should just snatch the next man that comes off the subway.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
then you're stuck with that man who came off of the subway and may or may not live in Guelph, Ontario, and is a deadbeat. Anyway, hypothetical.
But yes, I was like, I wasn't going to let the fertility thing scare me into choosing the wrong partner.
Yeah.
Because also like that's someone you have to
parent with.
raise a child and parent with. Yes. So
yes.
I haven't controlled my life up until this point. Like, yes, I've made decisions that have put my life one way or the other, and I've been comfortable with them. And I feel like you just have to do that and move forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was really confident in my decision. I'm like, if I'm going to meet the right person and he wants to have a child, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Right. Enter in the right person. Bum, ba-da-ba.
Yes, that's right.
Bam!
And it wasn't until I was 39.
Cute.
Yes. That,
Young and spry.
That I was
39.
Young and spry 39 when I was, met Graham, my husband. And he was older as well. He was in his 40s. So we kind of like had met, and we both had, dated a lot of people in our lives. And I feel like that's also timing is a thing. You can't just like force timing. You wait for it. And for me, I had to wait till I was almost 40. So
the nick of time.
The nick of time. Yeah.
So then you and Graham become one.
Yes. Well,
as a family unit.
We bought a house within 6 months of dating, and we moved in together, and people thought that was really like rushed. But again, I feel like this was also the pandemic. So we met December 2019.
Right.
And we were like not even 2.5 months into dating when the pandemic hit. So everybody like was locked down, and we were locked down together. So
you learned a lot.
You either make it like it made relationships or broke relationships. So
yeah.
We decided like from dating from the pandemic from March to June, why don't we just buy a house? Because we were going back and forth between our condos. And so we bought a house, and then we got engaged about 6-7 months after that, and so the things moved pretty rapidly. But again, I had turned 40. Actually, he proposed on my 40th birthday. So I was like, at that time, you're just not, should we be counting months? We were just like, yeah, we're adults. Let's make decisions. And we both knew what we were great for each other, and we both wanted the same thing. So, and that's like, once we got engaged, then we started talking more about like having kids. We had, obviously that was a partner relationship, and I knew he really wanted to have kids. And I was, still the one that was like on the fence. I would be happy with a child. I would also live a happy life if I was just like married with our dog.
Right.
So I was okay either way. And that's where I think we both went into it as like not a lot of pressure on each other. This relationship was not built on like, we must have kids.
Right.
It was like built on love, and we both really wanted to be together, and we would be a family unit, whether it was the two of us and our dog or whether it was a child. But we wanted to give it a good shot. So that's when we tried for probably 6 more months. I don't know.
Yeah, you're the sort of person who, once you know what you want, you're going to give it your best shot no matter what.
Yes. So we tried, and I was coming to see you. So like, I was very much like monitoring my cycle. I wasn't just like, we weren't just blindly.
Yeah, we had ovulation strips.
Ovulation strips. It was very much like
caring for the sperm.
Yes.
Trying to steal his bicycle.
Yeah.
That was just on my end.
He loves cycling. Yes.
Loves it.
So it was a lot of cycling.
Much to my chagrin.
And again, not a lot of like thought went into like, could that be a factor?
Yes.
But in the end, I think
thought a lot about it.
I think you thought a lot about it. I'm sure you wanted to text Graham directly, but you were like, do not bike.
Honestly, I was like, what's his number? You were like, I am not giving it to you.
Yeah. I mean, that was like stealing his happiness. So yeah.
A nice wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think after, we were like prepping for a wedding, which was in the summer of 2022. But, after 6 months of not trying is when we kind of said, okay, let's go back to the fertility clinic that I had been at previously to freeze my eggs. And like, let's start asking questions as a couple of like, we've been trying, like, what is our next step? So that's kind of like what we did. And us being now, I guess, like I was 40, approaching 41. and Graham's 3 years older than me, we were like, okay,
What are our odds here?
what are our options? And I think, we were planning for a wedding. So at the time, I didn't want to get like pregnant right away. However, like now I guess I could have been pregnant for the wedding, but
I was trying to get you to become pregnant for your wedding.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that part.
Yes. You were like, it's not a big deal.
You were like, I'm going to preserve these so that I'm not pregnant for my wedding.
Yes.
And I was like, let's just do it. Pregnant for the wedding, extra guest. How cute.
Yes. And in hindsight, like egg freezing and IVF is all about, controlling your destiny essentially of when you want to be pregnant. And that's why at the time I was like, again, an option of like, if I can choose an option of when I want to be pregnant, that sounds very appealing to me, because I'd like to like have this nice wedding and then have a nice honeymoon in France and drink wine and, live life, and then choose to have a child and like just take the embryo and implant it and then magic.
Beautiful. The gorgeous vision.
That was the vision in my head, but
I love it.
And that's why we went down the path of IVF, is one, as an insurance policy in case we wanted to have a second. That was really the conversation as well. If you want to have a second, like you're looking at being closer to 45 by the time you have your second. So like if you have a viable embryo, then you can just implant it, and it, another insurance policy of if you want a second. And so at the time, it was like that was more appealing to Graham because he had always decided that he wanted to have two kids. I was kind of on the fence. So I was like, okay, let's try this. This makes sense. But I didn't at that time make a correlation between egg freezing and IVF is the same thing. So like if I decided not to do egg freezing because of the number of rounds I would need to be successful, I was a little bit naive to think that like now that I had a sperm, but I would get all these eggs now and they would be more viable. One, because it would be an embryo, but
right. It is easier to freeze embryos though.
Yes.
And have a higher probability of success than it is to freeze an egg, because egg cells are mostly water and it's like one cell.
Right.
Compared to an embryo, which is a multitude of cells.
Right.
Thaws and survives. And you already know that it's fertilized.
Right.
So it does make a difference.
But I thought
in terms of the work involved, I still would do, I would still want embryos, even if it was with donor sperm, over frozen eggs.
Yeah.
Because at least you would know as you were going through the IVF process, like, hey, I retrieved, this number of eggs and then this number fertilized.
Right.
As opposed to just freezing eggs and hoping that they'd fertilize.
Right.
Just had to insert that rant into this podcast episode somewhere.
Yeah. And I feel like you really instilled that in me. You were though, like, I think you were slightly like trying to be like, like, would you consider doing an IUI first? And I was just like, no, like I kind of have made up my mind for these reasons. Like one, I didn't envision myself being pregnant for my wedding, but that's really where you were like, okay, well.
I was nervous because when you were going through that first round of IVF.
Yes.
I had asked you to get your estrogen values as we were going.
Yes.
And I don't remember if it was at that point, but you had 2 follicles, maybe 3 follicles. And then your estrogen, though, was quite low for having that many follicles.
Well, the first round we didn't even get to because I had a cyst. And then that's when I had to come back to you and be like, they were like, you have a cyst. Like, we can't even do it.
Right. But in terms of the ones where you actually were growing follicles.
Yes.
I just remember.
And then when we started that, and but I was kind of like shocked because I just thought there would be a lot more.
Yeah.
And there was 2. I think like maybe 3, but not really.
Yeah.
But 2,
Your estrogen was mid to low.
yes.
And I just remember knowing that that wasn't going to result in the retrieval of mature eggs. And so thought, let's just broach the subject of an IUI, turning this into an IUI.
And before I could even broach that, I got COVID and we had to cancel. I had my egg retrieval like booked and everything. And
from Vancouver.
Yeah. And the clinic had to pull all 9 doctors together and say, we actually like hadn't seen this like that 3 days or about 3-4 days before my actual retrieval. I had COVID and they were like, no, we have to cancel. So I was like just devastated because I had just I was at the end pretty much.
And you had been on a trip.
Yeah. And I couldn't even go in and do an IUI at this point. Like I could not enter the clinic because I had COVID. So
yeah.
I just had to stay at home.
Full of eggs.
Yeah. Full of eggs. Yes.
A depressed little omelet.
Yeah.
At home. It's awful.
Yes. So had to wait to start again and then started again. Same results next time. Just before essentially our wedding and my bachelorette party, I did the retrieval and it was 2 follicles and 1 was retrieved. And the other, well, 1 was retrieved. I thought both would be, but no, I found out after the fact 1 was retrieved and it wasn't mature. So I was like devastated, 1, because now I've just done essentially 2 rounds and nothing to show for it. And I probably would have had a similar result with the egg freezing, right? Maybe we would have had 1 each round, maybe.
Potentially.
Yeah.
You would definitely have, with what your AMH was at 37, had like a low yield per retrieval.
Yes.
For eggs. And the likelihood of those eggs being viable and turning into an embryo is like 10%.
Yeah.
At 37, 38 per egg. That's rough.
Yeah. Mentally and physically after that, I was like, okay, we need to like take a pause. 1, the wedding's like 4 weeks away. So it's a good time to like take a pause, reevaluate, and then we'll broach the discussion again after the wedding of like, where do we go from here? And so that's kind of what we did is we approached the fertility clinic again. They were open to doing another round of IVF, but they were transparent that like we may not have different results, but we could keep trying. But it was really me and my husband pushing for IUI because you were really
adamant
that that's the route we should go versus doing another round of IVF. So we said, okay, can we take this other path and do IUI? I understand that's probably what people try first. And a lot of my friends did IUI first, 3 or 4 rounds, and it didn't work. So that's also played into my decision, or our decision, like really of why we did IVF, is because I had heard, 1, the low success rate of IUI, which was, told to me by the clinic, and from very close friends who had done it, they were not successful. So I didn't really know of anyone who was successful with IUI.
The problem about the information around IUI is that it's not the low probability of success is also because it's prescribed as a, frontline treatment, almost as like a precursor to IVF. And so a lot of the time, patients that are being pushed to do IUI, it's after timed intercourse hasn't worked. So it's this, okay, we'll do this arbitrary 3 rounds of timed intercourse, 3 rounds of IUI, and then we'll move to IVF. As opposed to, like, there was just a new study put out last week where it was found that it should actually be 8 rounds of IUI instead of 3 to determine whether or not success could be achieved that way, which to me makes a lot more sense because if, the general rule is 6 to 12 months of trying, depending on how old you are, why all of a sudden would it only be 3
rounds and then you move to IVF? Yeah,
exactly. And I feel like the whole aspect around IUI, and it not being understood that it should be to benefit like poor motility, as opposed to because there's an issue with the female and the timing is the problem. Like the number of patients that I have where timing of the IUI was incorrect.
Right.
And we know because I actually have a lot of patients now using Mira, which is an amazing little device that helps us discern based on estrogen, LH, and then also progesterone, like when they actually are ovulating, as opposed to like a lot of clinics are closed on the weekend.
Right.
And so they're giving an IUI on a Friday, thinking that maybe the patient will ovulate on a Saturday or Sunday. But if the whole point of the process is to really capture the right time, then how dare you not be so exact about the timing?
Right.
This is another Anne's rant, but I find like IUI gets a bad rap because similar to IVF, it's not prescribed appropriately.
Right.
It's like a salve that's just going to put across a burn, regardless of what's going on with that burn.
Right.
Like figure out what's going on with your patients.
And I feel like that was one of my issues that we had nailed, is that we never could really like
Discern
the window
when
for
you were
me was like
ovulating.
never consistent. In hindsight, was like, okay, that was really hindering, natural
Timing.
conception was timing for us.
Yeah.
And obviously like motility was another factor. But yeah, I mean, that's where I was like 3 rounds of IUI and then we go back to IVF. Like I was like, okay, we would have to like stop and reevaluate if we go back to IVF, because at that point, like this fertility journey had been like a lot on me. And I was like, okay, we need to reevaluate whether that's like what we truly want to do, or whether we go back to the decision that we're a happy family unit as we are, versus like continuing. But, luckily we persisted, and the first round we did medicated IUI, and that did not work with my body. So
we're unhappy.
Yeah, I was like ovulated early.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying like, why are you doing medicated? And I was just like, I don't know.
It was just a really high dose.
Yeah.
It was though they were trying to replicate IVF.
Right.
With and not realizing that the amount of stim that you give your patient has to be tailored. Like they had all of this information about you from having done these previous cycles. You can tell, this concept of like more is always better is very misguided, especially for patients with diminished ovarian reserve. Like there's a specialist in New York in REI who he specializes in giving a very low stim protocol, and he mostly sees DOR patients, and he has a very good success rate. Whereas here, they're assuming more eggs, more follicles equals higher chances.
Right.
You hear that all the time, and that's not the case. You have to consider, what is this stim doing to the eggs? Like if the concept of 90 days, that really matters.
Right.
So if it matters how mature an egg is, like you have to take into consideration that process from, primordial to antral follicle stage. You can't rush it. They're very delicate in that window.
I feel like that correlation wasn't made, because I also was seeing a different doctor at this time than the IVF, because obviously the IUI is kind of like separate, right, from the IVF. So like that correlation, I feel like, between what didn't work, wasn't made.
Yeah, the clinic you were at, they have a separate clinic for more of a IUI timed intercourse scenario.
Natural conception.
A natural conception.
Yeah.
If you will.
Yes. But I think round 1, after it didn't work, I think, both you and the doctor was actually very good. She was like, I don't think that this like medicated is working for you. And I was like, I 100% agree. So would Anne would say the same thing, but I didn't say that. I thought that in my
I'm just
head.
the creep over here.
I thought that in my head. And so we went to unmedicated. We were like, okay, second round, let's try an unmedicated IUI. And that's what we did. And weirdly enough, unmedicated, as they were monitoring me, I had 2 right and left versus 1. And they were like, wow, okay, like this is very good because now, there's a more probable chance that like if one egg doesn't release, then the other one will. And so it'll be more successful. So I was kind of surprised that was just like totally natural, my body doing that. And we actually went in on a Sunday. So in good news, it was a Sunday to do the IUI.
Yeah.
And
timing.
It was timing was critical. Obviously, the sperm wash, I think, did miracles.
Really did.
So the motility was from 30 to 95% or something like that, like really crazy. And yeah, and then I was like, okay, that was fairly easy, fairly cost effective. And then let's see. And then 2 weeks later, on October 18th, the clinic called me and said, kind of sounding surprised, congratulations, you're pregnant. And I was like, sorry, what? And I was like as in shock as they were, because I honestly just didn't want to get my hopes up because we had gone through this, and I was like, okay, obviously I don't want to like set my mind to something and then be disappointed. So yeah, I was like really in shock. And then we continued on with the test, and like everything, progressed super normal. And fast forward a year, I have almost a 13-month-old son. Yes. And that was only round 2 of IUI. So, we would have gone for round 3.
Yeah.
And I do believe if we had pushed for more rounds, like we probably would have had success at 1 round based on like continuing to try unmedicated.
Yeah. You're just optimizing at each point of the process.
Yes. Yes. And it was one of those 2 eggs, obviously, that was really good quality.
Yeah.
And that was at 42, and I had my son at 43. So now as I look back, it's like, okay. And obviously when I birthed him, I was like, I'm advanced maternal age.
Oh my God.
And my OB
this is YouTube now though, so they can see you in your youth.
My
won't believe it.
Made me feel so good. He was just like, you are like, I have patients who are 48, 49, like you at like 42, 43, like you're not advanced maternal age, like, and you're super healthy. So I feel like that, that stigma has very much is hopefully we're overcoming that.
Yeah.
But I do think it takes like really great doctors to also say like,
well, I think it's really strange that there is this stigma around like advanced maternal age, because I have 25, 26, 27-year-olds who are in terrible condition.
Yes.
Who have become pregnant and then they have horrible pregnancies because they were not cared for pre-pregnancy for various conditions. And then like really hard labors, deliveries, and postpartums. Like health is not part of this paradigm. It's not part of this picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's age. Like it's this strange stamp.
Yeah.
Of what will determine, who's caring for you.
Right.
And what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Like so bizarre.
Yeah.
So you stamp that stigma out, Wend.
I know.
Yeah.
And I, like you said, I kind of like trusted my gut, and like I always in my head was like, okay, if you wait for what's right and like if it's gonna be right, it'll happen. And I was also in this whole fertility journey. I was like, if it's meant to be, it will happen. But I also think it's like I learned so much through it.
Yeah.
And so that's also why I'm sharing my story, because I feel like, I wish I had done even if we waited 6 months, like till after the wedding and just done the IUI, like I wish I had kind of done that. But I felt like there was such like pressure, and I felt like it would be different, which again, I don't know why I thought it would be different from when I was 37 to when I was 42, that all of a sudden it would work for me. But
right.
I just thought, yes, it would be. But I'm really glad that I had your guidance, and I
Wendy.
also trusted your gut and really pushed for what I felt like was working for my body, which, was an unmedicated IUI. That was the success, which you wouldn't think that was like on the bottom of the fertility totem pole, right?
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Is trying to find what's appropriate for each person.
Right.
And really caring to find out, as opposed to just giving everybody the same treatment.
Right.
The same procedures. That's going to lower everybody's success.
Yes.
Because it's about appropriateness.
And I feel like that's why, I try to tell a lot of my friends too that are still like dating, and I said, like, look at my story. It's like everyone chooses their own path, but like for me, I just felt like you could still, don't dim the light if that's like what you want.
Right.
Like just continue to be healthy, wait for your person, and then like seek out what's best for your body, right?
Yeah. At that point.
Right.
Like you were still ovulating every month. You're still getting a period.
Yes.
Every month. I think it was also important because that's not always the case.
Right.
A lot of clinics, one of my greatest gripes is that, like, I had a patient yesterday who told me that her OHIP they were out of monitoring for her at this one clinic. Like she could get no more monitoring
because
OHIP wouldn't cover it. And she is just 40. And at that point, your cycle can become more irregular.
Right.
Does it mean that you have a lower chance of getting pregnant each month? Yeah. It does. Does it mean you have no chance? Absolutely not. But to suggest that the only point, for success once you're over 40 is to either use, donor eggs or IVF, when IVF has like a 2.7% success rate. Like if you had known going into that bachelorette round that your chance of success was 2.7%, you wouldn't have been so gutted.
No.
Because you would have thought to yourself, well, okay, statistically, that would make sense. But from an IUI standpoint, your percentage of success is much higher.
Right.
So.
And the line I remember you always telling me was, you have a higher success rate when the egg is inside your body.
That's right. Less delicate.
Right. Which is what happened, because it was like as soon as they retrieved the one egg for IVF, it was not mature, not viable. So
yeah, your body is the best lab.
Yes.
All the labs are trying to replicate what happens in the body.
Right.
So if you don't need to, don't remove it from the source. Oh, the ultimate lab. Ryan is completely passed out.
No.
He's
I think we're robbed.
Wendy. Thank you for coming on.
That's the end of the story.
I appreciate it. Are we going to go for a second?
I don't think so.
Shoot, man. Let's go.
Not to dissuade anyone, I'm sure at 45. I just don't know if I have the energy at 45.
You have a rambunctious little lad.
Yes. Yeah.
That's fair.
I don't know how you do it, but I have one. And
Wendy, I leave.
That is enough. That is enough for me right now.
I'm like, I'm the mother of the year
my
here,
cup
not with any of my children.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I am content. My dog is my second child. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so appreciative that I got to see you then.
Yes.
And then also that you shared your story.
Thank you.
It's one that I share regularly to patients.
Yes.
And now I'm happy that you've come to corroborate it. See, she does exist. She's not someone I just made up to make you feel better. Thank you so much for listening this week. Every time that you listen, you share, you rate, you review, it helps boost our show, which not only gives me the motivation to carry forth, but also helps attract new guests with new information. So thank you so much. Please don't forget, again, rate, review, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll talk to you soon on the next episode.